Hello, welcome to vcfo's third webinar in our three-part series. My name is Paul Hagerty and I'm here with Karli Osgoodby. We'll be just a minute while we wait for people to sign in. They're coming in pretty quickly. All right, well, it's good to be back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rejuvenate Your Total Compensation Package. Karli and I and the vcfo team would like to wish everyone in the path of Ian peace and safety, and we hope that everybody fares okay. For the webinar, we encourage your questions and comments and ask that you use the Q&A feature. You can share them with us there. We'll answer as many questions as we can live. If there are more questions than we can answer in our time, we'll follow up with answers in email sent to all attendees. My name is Paul Hagerty. My role at vcfo is a senior people ops HR consultant. My experience in HR fills 25 years of working with various industries, various organizations, from startup to a 128-year-old chocolate company. I've worked as an employee development manager, HR business partner, HR director, and as a self-employed consultant. Loved every step of the way, and now I'm on board with vcfo. Hey, Karli, tell us about you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Karli Osgoodby. I, too, am a senior people ops HR consultant. I am in the Denver, Colorado market with vcfo, and I come to you with over a decade of experience in human resources, working in various roles in different industries throughout my career, being staffing, private equity, startup, and most recently, healthcare. Our next slide, we're going to talk about our company very briefly for those of you on the webinar who are new to vcfo before we jump into our content today.
Thanks, Karli. Yeah, at vcfo, our mission, our job is to make companies grow stronger. And we do that through diagnosis and delivery of some game-changing resources that we offer. You can see more about our history here and our capabilities on the slide, but I know that Karli's got more to say.
Yeah, so what are we? We are a professional services company, B2B business model. Who are we? We are your CFOs, your controllers, and human resource directors. What type of work do? We do fractional, project-based, interim work and mentoring services. And why do we do it? We do it to make companies stronger.
All right. You might remember in part one, we talked about thoughts and data about recruiting, specifically promoting from within and employee referral program strategies. Then we moved on to part two, where we shared talent retention and those strategies with you. Now, recruiting and retention are both affected by compensation strategy. That's part three. Today, we'll talk about effective compensation planning and strategy. Two of the strategies that we'll focus on are total rewards, what's your plan there, and your compensation philosophy. What's the overarching philosophy in terms of pay and compensation? We'll talk through defining the strategy, the key aspects of each, specific data for each, and some pro tips for each as well. Now, Karli is going to take us through strategy number one, total rewards.
Absolutely. So if you've joined us for the other two parts of the webinar series, you know we start off with a quiz. So in similar fashion, we're going to start off with a quiz. So please, if you'd like, put your best guess in the chat feature today. So the first one is, a total reward strategy includes all of the following except, is it A, compensation, B, recognition, C, benefits, or D, marketing? So I'll give you a couple seconds to put your best guess in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of correct answers. That's right. The correct answer is D, marketing. So compensation, recognition, and benefits are all included in an organization's total reward strategy. So jumping right into that, what is it? total rewards is a system or program that's implemented by an organization that provides monetary, beneficial, and development rewards. It combines compensation and benefits with personal growth opportunities inside of the work environment. So if you don't have a total reward strategy formalized, I recommend partnering with your in-house HR leadership team to develop one, or call us. We can help you with that. This 4-step process shown here on this slide can be used to develop one, or can also be used to evaluate an existing total reward strategy to revamp it, update it, or even change the program altogether. The next slide I want to talk about, it shows a great graphic of those 4 steps, but I just mentioned, but broken out into a more digestible approach. So I won't talk through all 9 of the steps, but I did want to highlight a few of those steps and expand on them more. So the first one, evaluate your current plan. If you're developing a total reward strategy, you're likely not starting from scratch. Take an inventory of what you're already offering and where you currently stand. What does your current compensation package look like? What is your compensation philosophy? And don't worry, we're about to get to comp philosophy as the second part of this webinar. How are you doing with other components of total rewards? You may find that some components in your rewards package are stronger than others. This assessment and evaluation will give you an idea of what you should prioritize and focus on. Moving to including the leadership, number 3. Once the feedback and assessment steps are completed, share that with the organizational's leadership and stakeholders. Their buy-in and their insight into the organizational strategy and the company goals is integral to the success of the total rewards program. Oh, and most importantly, you need to gain their approval for the rewards budget. Moving to number 6, keeping up with trends. This doesn't mean that you should implement every hip perk that you've ever heard about, but you do need to pay attention to what's happening in the world, your industry, and how it affects rewards. For example, think about the pandemic and its effect on mental health. Employers year over year are adding and offering mental health coverages to their overall benefit package because we know how important offering that type of service is to our employees in an unprecedented time like the pandemic has posed on us. Number 8, communicate a total rewards strategy to the employees. The communication strategy is a critical component. Employees need to understand what you're offering to them, and it's essential for their buy-in. Without buy-in, the employer's efforts in building this complex total reward strategy, no matter how perfectly designed to meet the employee's needs, may be futile if you don't have a good communication approach to share it with your employees. And then tracking the cost and impact. Your total reward strategy should have a good return on investment over the long term. So track what you're spending and how it impacts and the impacts that it creates. Is your retention percentage higher? What about overall engagement scores? Paul, I know you wanted to touch on one of these points too.
Yeah, all of these are important, but for me, my personal favorite is number 2, and that's asking for employee feedback. Really, when you know what your team perceives to be a valuable reward versus guessing or assuming, you're on your way to a powerful, efficient, and effective total rewards program. So we'll talk about it perhaps, but there are many ways to get the information and the feedback from your employees. Pick the one that suits you best and find out what it is that they value and make sure that you're including as much of that as you can in your total rewards program.
Definitely.
Thanks,
Building a
Greg.
total reward strategy is complex, but it's worth the investment. The advantages of a total reward strategy make the organization more competitive and strengthen the loyalty of employees. So this next slide comprises these 5 elements that make up total rewards when developing a strategy. So you need to look through all of these different lenses and incorporate all of them into the strategy. So compensation, no brainer, and we're going to get to that shortly. Benefits, That's the package provided to employees to enhance their physical, emotional, familial safety. It's your traditional benefits like your health, dental, vision, leave of absence, life and disability, and retirement plans. Well-being. Organizational cultures that value and promote employee well-being have become more critical for employers to attract and retain employees. If you joined us last webinar where we focused on retention strategies, we talked about how well-being plays into the engagement and motivation. So some examples of well-being programs that you can incorporate into the total reward strategy would be employee assistance programs or employee resource groups, DE&I programs, company-sponsored events, opportunities to volunteer. These are all examples of well-being programs that you can offer. Recognition, we talked about that as well last webinar, but looking at it from a total rewards perspective, bonus awards, spot awards, tenure awards when you're recognizing people for their years of service, performance awards and promotions. These are all forms of recognition when looking at the key aspects. And then lastly, development. So implementing career development initiatives in your total reward strategy that helps enable employees to advance within the organization and realize their full potential.
You remember from our last seminar that career development was the #1 reason why people would stay or leave. So it really plays in here too as well. Sorry, Karli, go ahead.
No, that was great. Thank you, Paul. So the next slide, we're going to talk about traditional health offerings. So in terms of that benefit component that I just shared in the last slide, I thought it was important to bring up some tips around that because one size does not fit all in terms of benefits, and different employees have different needs in terms of benefits. Some use them a lot because of health conditions or somebody in their family, one of their dependents needs a more robust coverage than others who maybe just go to their yearly physical each year. So one size does not fit all. So when you are able to offer choice and flexibility, we highly recommend you doing that. An example of offering choice would be offering more than one medical plan, like offering a PPO or a high deductible health plan. Another tip would be some cost sharing strategies. Can you, as the organization, cover the employee only premium at 100%? That might entice your employees who have a spouse, but that spouse is working, to join their own company medical plan. And a secret between us, that helps save the company money if you're doing the employee only coverage and not carrying the other dependents with those claims associated with that dependent. Next tip, if you're offering a high deductible health plan, do you as the employer offer incentive around funding a portion of the employee's HSA account? Could you tie that to a wellness program or platform that you use that would incentivize and promote healthy behaviors like getting an annual physical, which ultimately in the long term could drive down your medical claim costs that the employer is paying for? And then the flexibility, I talked about choice and flexibility. So flexibility being incorporating telehealth or telemedicine in your current benefit package, and then mental health benefits as well. As you can see from these statistics from the Society of Human Resource Management, more and more employers are offering that telehealth, telemedicine benefit, as well as offering mental health coverage.
Yeah, Karli, what I'm noticing here, and probably the rest of the folks are too, is that we're talking about this whole employee and not just focusing on one particular benefit, because as you mentioned, one size doesn't fit all. So if we can bring a whole menu of benefits that keep our, that help our employees in a variety of ways, that's the key. Medical coverage is essential. Nobody's saying it's not, but the rest that Karli mentioned, and even more, the list could go on, will be even more of a reason for your employees, your people, to stay with the organization when they feel valued, and this is one way to show them that.
So some innovative strategies and maybe something that you're not offering today that maybe will make you pause and think, maybe we should be looking into this. Childcare and elder care assistance. So the pandemic triggered an epiphany for many parents and caregivers who found that it would be more cost effective or simply better for them or another parent to stay at home instead of commuting to work and incurring those burdensome childcare and elder care costs. I listened to an HR podcast recently where they featured one such parent who calculated that her net take-home pay would be a mere $2 an hour. Yeah, $2 an hour after factoring in the caregiver expenses. She, like many others, determined that this was not an acceptable arrangement. And, many employers implemented remote and hybrid work models that could help ease this issue. But there are organizations, however, that need employees to be on site 100% of the time or away from their homes to serve their customers. So these organizations have turned to implementing childcare and elder care subsidies or partnering with organizations such as care.com that really help steer and guide the employee to those resources and those vendors to help alleviate that stress that they have at home so they can focus on the work that they're doing at work. The second strategy being student loans. So millennials now comprise 50% of the workforce, and trends show that that number is expected to rise over the next few years. And as we all know, one of the biggest issues millennials face upon entering the workforce is being saddled with significant educated-related debt that acts as an albatross in their lives for years and years. So the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2020 does allow employers to offer up to $5,250 in student loan repayments tax-free. And they can partner with vendors similar to the child care assistance that helps run and manage that program for them. And you could even tie it to retention, like buying in, they can join this program after they've been employed for 3 years. So there's a lot of opportunity and innovative ways that you can leverage some of these benefits that aren't your traditional type benefits to really attract, engage, and motivate employees.
And Karli, just on this one in particular, if things don't change, then the next generation coming up is also going to be burdened with some student loan debt, no doubt. So it's something that you can get ahead of if you choose to and take advantage of the Consolidated Appropriations Act.
Right. So to close out this topic, and before we move to our next strategy, I did want to offer some pro tips just to kind of wrap it all up. So offering choice and flexibility when you can, like we talked about, it's not a one size fits all model or situation when you're talking about benefits and overall total rewards. My next pro tip, implement a total reward statement. An example of that is on the right hand of the screen from ABC Corporation, but these total reward statements, you can tie it into when you're meeting annually for a performance review, mid-year, a check-in with your employees. But these total reward statements create awareness and appreciation of the new or existing benefits that you offer. They provide a high-level understanding of the benefits and encourage a wise use of the benefits. It also plays into that buy-in and the communication approach, because an employee could get this one-page snapshot and be like, oh, I totally forgot that we have this benefit. I need to use that. I need to take advantage of that benefit. That promotes the buy-in and the attractiveness of your total reward strategy to those employees. Next pro tip, develop a periodic evaluation process of your total reward strategy. So it has to be assessed on a regular basis to determine if it's meeting the organization's objectives as well as the employee's needs. Changes in the business climate, economy, regulatory environment in some cases, and workforce demographics all create dynamics that can affect the total reward strategy. So you should consider developing goals and measurements to assess the total rewards and adjust as necessary. And then lastly, you should compare your offerings to a competitor. Are your employees leaving to go work for another competitor because the competitor's overall reward strategy is stronger and more competitive than yours? Do they offer more choice and flexibility than you do? Where can you improve to remain competitive, to attract and keep the talent you have and not lose them?
All right, Karli, nice job on strategy number 1, total rewards. And we'll move now to the second strategy, compensation philosophy. And as we do that, like we always do, we have a quick quiz for you. Which of these is not an element of compensation? I won't read it to you. It's a long list, but I'll give you a minute to check it out yourself. And one of those might not be an element of compensation. Answers in the chat if you wish. All right, well, as you see, they're all part of the compensation offering that you have. I thought maybe the movie passes would be a question mark, but even that applies and is considered compensation. So there's your quiz. All of those things in that list are part of your compensation philosophy and compensation plan. A couple of statistics. We always promise data. Did you know that 92% of organizations in the US are giving base pay increases in 2022? That's not unusual. Most always do, the majority do. 44% of the organizations are planning to give pay increases higher than what we've seen to be the standard 3%. And that's 13% more organizations than the average of the last 6 years. So there's something happening there. 33% cut or froze pay in 2020 and did not make up for it, and they don't plan to. So there's something happening there too, something at play. 44% of organizations say that pay is the reason they're losing talent. We've talked about that in probably all 3 of the webinars and now here today. That is still and always will be part of the compensation. In my experience, even personally, I never feel like I'm paid enough. So that's always going to be a question mark. Sorry, boss. I like what I'm doing. I like it right here. 84% of organizations are worried about inflation. I think we all are. I think it's been in the news. I think it's volatile right now. But only 29% have increased their budget. So that goes to planning, and proper planning comes from a proper philosophy. Some of the considerations, this might be a reminder from seminar 2, when talking about compensation, you want to know and be aware of what your market and what your competition's compensation looks like so that you can be competitive. Recognize that it's true that our high performing and sometimes undercompensated employers are targets for competition. The historical 3% we just talked about doesn't really and can't compete for retention with the current market and what's available when someone changes a job, even internally. Always be aware of our external and internal pay equity, make adjustments when right. Those are some important considerations going forward, just a reminder from session or webinar 2. What is a compensation philosophy? Here it is. A formal statement documenting the company's position about employee compensation. So you write it down, and you work on it and craft it. It explains why, the why behind employee pay, and creates a framework for some consistency. Most employers use the compensation philosophy to as an attraction tool, a retention tool, and also motivation. So that's the big picture. Compensation philosophy is built to do those things and seeks to identify the pay program and total reward strategies. Most, not all, but most organizations are transparent about this. This is, we pay middle, high, or low end, depending on their philosophy. The philosophy also identifies how the pay programs and strategies support the business strategy. There has to be a connection there. Also, the competitive outlook, operating objectives, and the staffing needs of the company. It all takes money, so we've got to budget properly too. And mentioned before, but worth mentioning again, compensation philosophy is used to attract people to join the organization.
I wanted to add quickly, it's super important for your leadership teams to understand their company's compensation philosophy and have some talking points prepared about the organization's compensation stance. So when these leaders are getting questions from their employees, the leader can reference those talking points and speak to it. If the philosophy is too general or ambiguous, it will fail to give that sufficient guidance. And you want to avoid any type of room for misinterpretation that the employees might feel or perceive.
All right. Creating an effective compensation philosophy requires a solid foundation. So we've talked about mission, vision, and strategy in all three webinars. Here it is again. That's the basis upon which most things are built within an organization. Same is true of compensation philosophy. The compensation philosophy builds on that. It becomes an all-encompassing total rewards picture. And once that's decided, what direction we're going to take, who we are in terms of compensation, then we need to understand the budget. So there's a financial aspect to it, not just in distributing the compensation, but in paying for it. So we have to do the budget planning. And once all of those pieces are together, and it may be fluid and moving, but once those things are ready, then we can deliver and execute on what we present as our compensation philosophy. So it is, again, I mentioned before, it's a document, it's documented, it provides clear guidelines for the compensation choices made by the organization.
And expanding on the budget planning aspect, so accounting, finance, and HR should be interconnected when you develop the comp philosophy, as you need to make sure that the budget is there for it by forecasting and creating a long-term and sustainable plan. You definitely don't want to overexert the budget one year, and then as a result of that, the consequence being you can't give increases for the next 3. I'll tell you right now, the employees aren't going to remember the big increase they got 3 years ago. They're going to remember that they haven't gotten an increase for the last 3 years.
Okay, thought we'd offer and share some examples of compensation philosophies. And example number 1 is the University of Arizona. No specific reason, just random because it's a little different from the next example. They have a very formalized approach to their comp philosophy. They're building on their mission, and then they add in some principles from the university. They want the philosophy to be current, informed, fiscally responsible, benchmarked against the market, transparent to all who see, shared governance, and accountability to meet the diverse needs and interests of the students and the university. It is available. I think that hyperlink will be available in the email when it comes out with the presentation. You can read the statement itself, but you'll get the feel for it. It's a little more formal than our next example, which is example 2, and looking at pay scale. You're familiar with them? We actually use them here at vcfo, but they have a less formal approach. It's more conversational. It's about transparency and communication and including employees in the conversation. There's that get the employee feedback piece. Using an employee focus encompassing more than just the paycheck. They look at components like the market is what's going to help them determine their compensation. So they're very aware of what's happening around them all the time. The work-life balance and well-being, Karli talked about that in the benefits piece as part of total rewards. Those are crucial to the success of the business and the employees and the student, the employees. And then pay is part of a comprehensive package. It's, again, not only the salary, but it's the other things that pay scale brings. And you can look at their compensation philosophy online as well. So I thought we'd share a couple of examples there, a little bit different from each other. One part of compensation philosophy could and may very well in your organization include long-term incentives. Long-term incentives are really a form of variable compensation. So you earn it today, and payment of the reward or the award is deferred over time. This often shows up in the form of ownership in the organization. In fact, you see here that 98% of public companies provide some form of long-term incentives, stock, restricted stock units, things like that, where there's some ownership part of it. And if you are contributing and you are building that business, then you will reap the rewards in the vested value of those stocks. Private companies can do the same thing, and they often do. In fact, 63% of private companies, while they may not be listed, are still offering some sort of ownership or other long-term incentive award as part of their total compensation philosophy. So as the name implies, long-term incentives, they do serve a retention purpose and encourage your employees to remain with the company while they are helping it to perform, achieve goals, and crush objectives, and then reap the rewards when the time is right.
Yeah, a quick personal story that relates to this. I worked for a company that offered an LTIP plan that was kind of profit sharing and performance based on how the company performed, would delegate the payout of the profit sharing to the company. And it was built on a kind of retention payout schedule. So at 5 years, your percentage of the profit sharing drastically increases when you stay. And that was absolutely a strong retention strategy for me, as I did stay the 5 years to reap that profit sharing reward.
All right, so it works. Thanks, Karli. Okay, the pro tips, and this is for my friends who learn visually. I decided to use a graphic and rather than a list this time. Tell me what you think. But anyway, the planning is a step process like any other. You need to define your philosophy. You need to understand your market and industry trends. Look at your internal comp data. Align the comp with the business strategy and goals. Create salary ranges and or grades. It's kind of back and forth on which way you land there. The salary ranges give you some flexibility. The salary grades are a little bit more pinpointed and tied to a job versus the salary ranges. Absolutely consider the budget. Everything has to be paid for to make this investment. And then you always, I hope, are considering all ends of your business where you are monitoring and assessing and evaluating the plan execution and then adjusting when necessary. A compensation philosophy is sometimes big and broad, but there are parts of it that are specific and can be fluid and change with the times or with the situation. So constant evaluation of your compensation philosophy is going to pay off too. So in summary, Karli and I would like to thank you for joining us on this 3-part webinar series. It's certainly been a pleasure to talk about actionable information for you and the folks that have visited with us all 3 or one of any 3 of the times. We talked about total rewards, we talked about compensation philosophy, and I'd like to ask Karli now if she has any last thoughts for us on webinar 3.
You know I do, Paul. Last thoughts would be that, employers can't afford to leave any stone unturned when it comes to creating a workplace that prospective employees want to be a part of and that existing employees want to stay with. That's why the companies must embrace a strategic approach to their total rewards and assess whether they have the best possible programs in place when it comes to that total reward strategy that support those desired business outcomes. So Yeah, I always have a final thought, Paul.
So
But like Paul said, I do want to thank you all for joining us. This does conclude our 3-part series. And we hope that you gained a lot of valuable insight as it relates to all the different strategies that we touched on over this 3-part webinar series. At this point, we're going to open it up to questions. So Paul, if you don't mind, I'll start and feed some questions here.
sure, what do you got?
So first question for you, Paul, how would you recommend gathering employee feedback when evaluating your total reward strategy?
It's a great question, and it goes right to my favorite number 2 of getting feedback. And there's several ways, so I'll just list a few. You could do it an actual survey, an electronic survey. You can do a paper survey. Just I'll slow down a second. Pulse surveys, a few rapid fire questions to bring in some information. A fully informed employee engagement survey, including information about your total rewards. You can, for those who are looking for a little more budget sensitive, use SurveyMonkey. I think I paid $206 for an annual subscription, and I can survey all day. So there's that way. And then I think the biggest part is we're trying to communicate and reach our employees, right? So pick up the phone. If you have people that are in a high-tech business, then okay, they're used to communicating and they're available on their laptop or computer. Others may be dispersed or remote and not available that way. Pick up the phone. People always are happy to hear from somebody and talk to a live voice as well. I hope
Awesome.
that helps. Karli, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered. I think it depends on the best approach that the organization has of how they communicate with their employees and can gather that feedback. Is it a phone call, or are they at their computers and desks all the time where they can take a survey like you mentioned? So I think it's dependent on the most effective way the organization communicates and is able to gather feedback from their employee population. Next question, I'll take it. How often should you evaluate your total reward strategy? So general answer, I would evaluate it yearly, having those tracking and measurements in place to evaluate the effectiveness of it and evaluate it year over year. Obviously, when there's changing dynamics like the economy or, things that I mentioned that impact those dynamic environments, looking at that in that lens or more frequently maybe than annually. But I think generally speaking, it should be evaluated, at least annually. Oh, Paul, can you explain? Can you explain why movie passes are considered compensation, and would this reflect on the total reward statement?
Okay, I deserve this. The movie passes are compensation in the broader sense. I gave you something and you didn't pay for it, so I'm compensating you for your time or for your performance. And it's a good question because it's a little silly. Movie passes are compensation, but in terms of taxes and payroll and that sort of thing, there's a threshold. I believe it's $200, and I can confirm that for you, where it becomes taxable. So the movie passes, yeah, if somebody gave them to me for free, I'm getting compensated for something. That's where that came from. And then what was the second part of that, the back end of that question, Karli?
How, would they be included on a total reward statement?
Oh, okay. I think we'd have to meet the threshold again in order to include it there. So if it was a whole theater full of movie passes, yes.
Perfect. Next question. How do you handle communicating total reward statements to employees? Do you hand them out, or do you meet with and present to employees individually? I think it would be really impactful to sit down and present it to them and meet with them individually, because different employees are going to have different information on their total reward statements. I'm not saying you have to go through it line by line, but what you feel comfortable with, highlighting those key points on those documents, I think would really go a long way and be impactful. when you're delivering that total reward statement.
Yeah, I agree, Carly. I think that's a individual opportunity for a connection there. Also, I believe, I'm pretty 100% sure that some of our payroll systems can actually have that information for the employee in their private portal entry where they can go see it every day, check out their 401k and check out their total rewards. But I think that the key is to make it a connection between supervisor and employee, or employee.
Awesome. Next question for you, Paul. How can we be aware of market trends and benchmarks in our industry?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think in today's world, there are so many ways. It's probably overwhelming. But, you know, Google's going to give you 6 billion answers. Then there's industry publications, there are industry blogs, there are industry foundations that have all of this kind of information, where we can find what's happening in the market and with our competition. I know I was broad on that Google thing, but their PayScale, Glassdoor, other such websites offer competitive, sometimes self uh, um, um, self-announced salaries, but others like PayScale use a market and not an individual pay-based answer. So I know that's a rambling answer, but there's so much information. I don't think I could give you a list right now. Perhaps we could put a few links in the email when we send it out. Great question. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I think maybe one more, but I think we're hanging on to our time limit here. We want to make sure people get back to what they need to do.
Yeah, I'll answer one more question really quickly, but I agree, Paul, we do need to wrap it up. So the questions that we don't answer, like we said, we will send you individual responses to the ones that we haven't gotten to live today. But last question, is there a different approach to comp philosophy for companies that have a large portion of their workforce hourly production employees versus high-tech professional employees? Absolutely. The comp philosophy is not a one size fits all, and definitely is unique and tailored to the organizations specifically. So there are many different approaches relative to industry, relative to size, types of workers that really do make up the comp philosophy. You want to make it as relevant and impactful to the employee population that comprises your workforce. Awesome. Well, thank you again, everybody, so much for your time today. We hope you enjoyed our webinar series, and take care and be safe out there.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.